And 1 second on that update slide.
Lizzie, I think we can probably start recording without it if you want to go ahead and share. I'll wait to start till it says we're recording.
Is it not recording? It says it's recording on my screen.
Have others been notified that it's recording?
Yes, I have been.
Okay, great. Excellent. Okay, so sorry about that. Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for joining a design subcommittee meeting of the Boston Civic Design Commission. The date is April 16th, 2024. It's 5:07 p.m. The BPDA is continuing to host public meetings in a virtual setting for the health, safety, and accessibility of Boston residents. My name is Christina Rico, Executive Director of the Boston Civic Design Commission, and I'm joined by my colleague Lizzie Turak, BPDA Urban Designer and Special Staff to BCDC. Before we proceed with the agenda, the open meeting law requires that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Therefore, please be aware that the Commission staff is making an audio and video recording of this meeting. Please turn off your camera and microphone if you do not wish to be recorded. For the purposes of the record, we have joined with us right now Commissioners Gillies-Smith, Commissioner Kotoridis, and Commissioner Ron. I believe we're scheduled to be joined later this evening by Commissioners Haseen and Kim. I'll notify folks when they join the meeting. Tonight's meeting's proceedings will follow typical BCDC Design Subcommittee meeting format, beginning with a brief presentation from the proponent, followed by comments from BCDC commissioners, followed then by public testimony. A reminder to proponent teams that presentations will be limited to 10 minutes. BPDA staff will give presenters a 2-minute warning during their presentation. With that, unless we have any questions or comments from the commissioners, we are ready for the first proponent team to present. We'll just need to give a second to promote all relevant presenters to co-host. That includes Brett, Evan, Emmett, David, and Stephen.
And I'll share my screen, so if you want to just make me the first co-host, then we can get started. Looks like. And can I take over screen sharing?
As soon as you have the capability to do so. I just have a quick intro, which is to say this will be the first presentation of the proposed project at 2 Charlesgate West, Fenway, to the design subcommittee following introduction at the March 5th monthly meeting. And it's my understanding that Commissioner Kim is recused from the review of this project. Are there any other commissioners present that I may have missed? Okay, hearing none, we invite the proponent team to begin presenting whenever they are ready.
All right, great. Thanks so much. Good evening, commissioners. Nice to see you all. Thanks for being with us. We'll cruise through our presentation tonight. Looking forward to seeing your comments or hearing your comments after this. So we're here to talk about 2 Charlesgate West in the Fenway. We're located at the confluence of Charlesgate, which is part of the Boker Overpass, Ipswich Street, which is the street that runs on the lower level of our site, and Boylston Street, which runs on the upper level of our site. As a very quick review of what we presented at the full commission meeting last time around, we're at a really interesting point in the city, a kind of overlap and overlay of the Emerald Necklace, a kind of 19th century urban planning idea with a high spine, this 20th century idea. And it's this really important hinge point between many different elements of the city. It also sits at a really important moment as a gateway into the Fenway. And there are a couple of these kind of gateway moments throughout the Fenway. One is the Pierce that forms this important kind of gateway moment. It was part of a gateway zoning in 2002. The other is Northeastern's Building H over on the south side, and then our site, which was also part of the rezoning in 2002, which is called the North Boylston Gateway area. A number of factors have kind of influenced and shaped our massing. We reviewed this last time around, but there's a baseline zoning of 135 feet and FAR of 9. And we've gone through a series of moves to kind of respect some of the existing street wall locations and pull the building off of the Back Bay fens. That includes lowering the portion of the building that fronts along Boylston Street and the fens and keeping that at a 70-foot height, and then raising the portion of the building that fronts on Ipswich Street and the Turnpike to allow for the amount of housing that needs to be built on the site. The proposed program is 400 rental residential units, of which 17% will be affordable, so 69 affordable units, some ground floor retail space at Ipswich, and we will be meeting Passive House certification for this project. Here are some existing photographs of the site in case you're not familiar with it. There's been a long history of changes at this site. So on the far left here, this is Olmsted's original plan for the site that was a kind of Gaston Square was the name for it. It was largely the same up until the end of the 1950s. You can see this image here. And then in the 1960s, as part of massive highway reconstruction, the Boca Overpass was built. And so you can see that the site changed quite significantly starting in the 1960s. MassDOT is now proposing another transformative reconstruction of that overpass, which is illustrated here. Just given our time constraints, I'm not going to go into any of the details, but it is a pretty significant change that includes 2 new bridges over the Turnpike, including one that's going to come for a landing right in front of our site, and will kind of transform a lot of what's happening in terms of the open space. I'm going to hand it over to Emmett, who can walk us through the landscape.
Sure. Thanks, Brett. So quickly to recap what we heard last time at BCDC, we got some great comments related to the landscape. A couple of those we've tried to summarize here, which were studying the plaza space's relationship to the architecture, looking at how we can further integrate the site history and context into the landscape design, looking for opportunities to make that public stair feel more active, which we'll highlight again in the presentation, providing some more information on the scale of the public spaces, and then some additional information on what's happening in relation to the adjacent roadways, both existing and proposed with the Boca. We really see this site as kind of a hinge point, especially in the Emerald Necklace, as it passes over the Turnpike. It's also a hinge point between the Fenway neighborhood and the East Fenway and Back Bay area of Boston. And we hope that this kind of connection and this opportunity of our site as a hinge will even be furthered when the new Boca redesign comes online, which will hopefully improve connectivity north-south in this area of town. On the left is what was presented at our March 5th meeting. On the right was an interim design that was developed in response to the comments that we received from BCDC. The goal here was to make the spaces feel more social and responsive to the architecture, and this design has since evolved a bit, which we'll get into in a second. So staying on the landscape here, we're proposing to remove the south side of parallel parking along Ipswich. It's currently one travel lane in each direction and a parallel parking on the north and south side. We're going to utilize this extra space to provide a pickup drop-off area, seating, bike parking, and some additional landscape. Since last time, we've made some minor modifications to the materials and adjusted the seating configuration here to make it feel a bit more social to respond to some of the comments we've heard.
And in terms of some of the building features, we're really trying to pair the public facing and common elements of the building towards the public realm. So along Ipswich here, we have the residential lobby, that public stair, and also a public elevator to negotiate the grade. And then towards the back off of an alley here will be the loading zone and some of the back of house space. All of these areas, including this bike room, are buried into the hillside.
Moving back to the landscape, we'll continue to highlight that public stair and really are excited about it and feel that it's a vital connection in the neighborhood. Taking a look at the public plaza space adjacent to the entry and amenity, we have been asked by the city's transportation and urban design teams to provide a second blue bike station as a part of the project. We've been proposing one all along at the lower level on Ipswich Street underneath the new Boca overpass. but we have been asked to provide a second at the upper level. So we've tried to do our best with this space and have oriented the bike parking so that we can still provide some community benefit, we feel, in the way of a planting area there and some seat walls, which kind of pick up on the language of some of the seating down at the Ipswich level.
And then at this level, you can see we're pairing some of the amenity space, the common areas of the building, with that frontage along Boylston Street. And you can see this public elevator lobby. We're also proposing a public restroom that will be open for visitors to the Emerald Necklace to be able to use and paired with that public elevator.
Sure. One of the comments we received last time was the importance of the proximity of our project site to the Emerald Necklace. So we started to look at how that might influence or impact our design. And one of the things we did is study the existing materials of the Emerald Necklace, which you can see some images of here. What we found is that there's a lot of decomposed granite, asphalt, stacked stone, pudding stone, that sort of thing found on their Emerald Necklace. So we have begun to look for ways to implement that on our project site. And then we also took a look at how these materials might be implemented in a slightly more modern or contemporary way. So looking at the materiality of the Boylston level, we are proposing a primarily native plant palette. Again, you can see the blue bike station there in front of the amenity space with the planting strip and the monolithic seat walls. We think those could be a nice element, and maybe it's a local reclaimed stone, as well as a natural paving stone in front. And then concrete sidewalk, which we've been very intentional about that selection and want it to match the adjacent public spaces. So that stair really feels like it's intended for public use. So taking a look at the site in relation to Boylston Street, we can see that it sits a couple feet below Boylston Street as it exists today, actually. But we do want to emphasize the connection from interior to exterior here and even further into the Emerald Necklace, or this little sliver of the Emerald Necklace beyond our project site. Moving down to the Ipswich level, we again tried to utilize materials that are in keeping with the Emerald Necklace. We are also proposing a continuation of the existing wall there. So the bottom 2/3 of the wall was original to the Olmsted design. The top third of the wall came about in the 60s with the original Boker overpass. So we're proposing to continue that language south or away from you here as we create that stair, and are looking at some additional opportunities for activation, which we'll get to in a second. And then primarily native planting with a standard concrete, a city standard sidewalk there. Taking a look at the existing section on Ipswich, again, it's an eastbound and westbound travel lane and then parallel parking on both sides with a really narrow 7'9" sidewalk. And are, as a part of our project, proposing to eliminate the south side parallel parking there, and in its place provide a more generous pedestrian zone, as well as some street trees, plantings, bike parking and seating. This is an area that gets really busy, especially during larger events, game days, that sort of thing. So we have been asked by BCDC last time we spoke with you all to take a look at ways to activate this public stair further. And we feel like there's a couple of places that might be a great opportunity for public art. The first is on the upper third of the non-historic portion of that retaining wall that we're proposing to continue along our stair. And we also think there might be an interesting opportunity to emphasize this connection through art on the public stair, maybe the face of the stairs here. And here are just a couple images of how we think that could look. It could be something that relates to the Fenway's music and sports identity. It could tell us a little bit about the site history, or it could even serve maybe as a wayfinding tool. So more to come here. And then I think this is a nice transition, which kind of shows the entry to the public elevator here to move to the architecture.
Great, thanks, Emmett. And just briefly about this image, we'll come back to it for the architecture, but we really wanted to make sure that there was an equivalence in the experience of the stair for those who can use it with the experience of the elevator for those who need to use that as well. And so getting the front door into that elevator lobby kind of coplanar and even with the stair at the top and the bottom was something that we've really worked to very hard to get right in terms of the planning. So I'm going to transition to the building design, and I'll try to cruise through this quickly. But as a summary of some of the comments that we got last time around, there was a question, is the building too quiet for the site? Looking to see maybe some more energy and dynamism, particularly at the public stair. And does the building stand out in the skyline, and review nighttime lighting? So we'll have an image of that. A request for more detailed views of the facade. So we'll have a few of those. And then this mid-rise piece, which has been coined the bustle, feeling kind of non-committal. That's the element that is neither the low portion along Boylston, but no, not quite as tall as the tower along Ipswich. Is it part of the tower? Is it part of the base? Is its own thing? So we've developed that a little bit more. And also setting that transition from the low massing to the tower. And then finally, we've put a lot of energy into this lower bar along Boylston Street. The comments that we got is that it should be contemporary, but more related to its pre-war neighbors, and look in particular at the windows of the neighbors next door. And maybe the proposed design, as it was shown last time around, was blending in too much.
Just let the component team be aware you have less than 2 minutes left. Thank you.
All right, so this was going to be a really quick tour through the building. There is one important massing change that we want to point out to everybody, and that is that we have lowered the building by 2 stories or 20 feet. This is in response to a lot of feedback from neighborhood stakeholders and working with BPDA. And that also extends to lowering the bustle, the mid-rise, by 3 stories or 30 feet. So you can see this difference kind of outlined here. I'm going to click through these images quickly, and then you all can ask me to come back to them later on. I do want to highlight a few things along Boylston Street in particular. So this is the view from the gas station to the south, all the way up to the existing building on the right here to the north. There are a few key elements here. There are some horizontal lines that move up and down along Boylston Street. There's a stone base. There's an important belt line that runs through some of these buildings, and then the parapet itself kind of steps up as you move along the street. And then there's also a rhythm of vertical datums and some of these entrance articulations that happen. And the buildings generally are more ornate in the center of the block and become less ornate down at the edges. And so you can see here a rendered version of our facade over onto the right. And there are some of those key things that we're trying to carry through. So using a stone base to articulate the building, carrying some of those horizontal lines, and then taking that material change up at the parapet and actually articulating the top floor in that. And then also using some of those vertical lines to help control the spacing of the bays, and taking some cues from the neighboring buildings proportionally in terms of the windows, and then ganging them, and also articulating an entrance portal similar to the ones to our south. And so here's a kind of rendered view of that Boylston wing and the transition from the Boylston wing up to the tower. This is that elevator lobby taking you down stairs. And looking at some of these details, we're proposing really 2 materials here, a kind of earth-toned brick and more of a red sandstone, and that gets articulated in some of the stone sills and the belt line, and as well as this entrance around the building. And then as we walk around the building, you can see this is that bustle element that's been lowered and slightly reshaped. And looking at that in detail, we see it using the same materials as the low Boylston wing, some of that earth-toned brick, and using a kind of 2 different textures, a running bond and then brick that's slightly pleated or turned 45 degrees to get a little more light and shadow. And that's at the top and wraps around the corner here. And then looking back at the tower, we've looked at some of these east facades and the metal paneling on it to bring both some more texture and a little bit more liveliness to the facade, so that there's more panel down at the base and then more glass as you get higher up through the building. And looking here at the north facade, this is very similar to what we showed last time around, but you can start to see some of the detailing of the metal panels. And then looking at this a little bit more in detail as well, some of the metal panel trim around the windows, as well as these piers that kind of dance back and forth, that extends up into the penthouse that will be a kind of glowing beacon in the building at night. This is that Ipswich stair view, and I wanted to point out just a couple of the details. That metal paneling as it hits the ground forms kind of these faceted angles that reflects the slightly pleated facade on the north and the south that will help catch the light as the sun travels through the sky. And then also down at the base, the bottom 6 stories of the tower get a soldier course treatment of brick, but every other course is projecting just to bring a little bit more sense of depth and shadow. You can see this elevator lobby here, which maybe you'll have questions about later. There were some questions about seeing this building throughout the city, so I'll just kind of click through some of these views so you can see from different elements. This is from the mid view and the Fens, and then more of a distance from the west and the east, and then from Mission Hill at Northeastern. And then finally, this view at night, where we imagine that Penthouse could actually use some color changing LEDs to help highlight its presence and maybe reflect to things that are happening in Fenway Park or some of the area around Lansdowne Street. Phew. All right, Lizzie, I hope I made it in 2 minutes, and I'll stop there and we can always back up.
Commissioners, the floor is yours for discussion. Perhaps it would be best to bring up some kind of site plan, or you let the proponent team know what image would serve your discussion best.
Christina, and if this was done at the monthly meeting, we don't need to go there, but I guess I wondered if there's any comment from staff on planning context specifically, well, generally speaking, but I'm also really curious about where this stands in relation to the nearest historic district.
Brett, if the context about the nearest historic district is something that you have, maybe cue that up. And I'll just say, Commissioner Coderitas, from the perspective of planning when the project was introduced, I don't know if you were able to join the monthly meeting. Oh, that's right, you were sick, I believe. Sorry about that.
Sorry to make you repeat it.
No, that's okay. The Director of Planning, Amy Chambers, came and gave that context. A lot, I think, of what we have to say about the project is sort of informed by zoning, which, like many places in the city, is woefully out of date, I'll say. This particular parcel is located in a gateway overlay district, from a zoning subdistrict perspective, where increased height beyond what is kind of around the site was imagined. This particular project exceeds what that numerical value was for height, but Amy sort of spoke a lot, I think, about the nature of the gateway overlay district, and our ability to kind of evaluate the project in that context.
Got it.
Brett, is the nearest historical district something you have context for?
Let me be clear and
Sure.
say, I wondered if
Okay.
any of the local historic districts if this lies within any of the local historic districts, whether it's part of Back Bay or any other.
The short answer is no, we do
Okay.
not.
Good enough. Thank you.
We don't need to raise hands here. It's just design
okay,
subcommittee.
okay.
Just, yeah, go ahead and talk that, Will.
Okay, well, let me thank you for the presentation. And I think there are certain big moves in the building that are really, really fine, and certainly can make it a gateway building. But I'm going to raise some questions about smaller mood and issues of simplification, if I might. Can you show us the slide that looked right there? That sorry, that slide. So the first question is about the stairway, and obviously the stairway is a wonderful public intervention and very good. But when I look at that slide, that feels like a very narrow slot. And I know, of course, it opens out to the right at the base of the stairs to the entrance. But of course, that's kind of hidden for many people's view. And so let me ask Brett, what's the rise and run of that stair?
So we have about a 6-inch rise. We've introduced 2 landings there so that the landing is never above your eyesight. So it feels like it's something that is surmountable and not over your head. But there's a pretty significant amount of grade change there. I think we have about 15 feet of grade change to negotiate from top to bottom.
So I would ask the question, if that stair were to come all the way out to Ipswich Street sidewalk, and you, instead of 6-inch rise, you had 5-inch rises, would that be a more welcoming stair? I know six inches is less than 7, but 6 inches in an exterior stair, I think is actually too small. I mean, too great. And I think 5 inches would be a much more welcoming stair. So I asked that, and of course, then what that does is brings the front door and the way into the elevator out to the Ipswich side rather than being hidden behind the column of the building. So I'm going to go through a series of things that are about simplification, if you will. Any comment on that, Brett?
Yeah, and Bill, if it's okay, I'll pull up a site plan to talk through some of our thinking about this. So we have spent, it's a great comment, and definitely one we spent a lot of time thinking about, and also talking to BPDA Urban Design about the character of the stair and wanting to make sure that it feels very public, and making sure that especially that public elevator lobby feels differentiated from the more private residential building. We did look at options where the stair got longer. And I think at the time, the feeling was that as the elevator door gets more integrated with the building, that it feels a little more privatized. That's not to say that there isn't still more work to be done of being able to pull this staircase out. I'd say it's about probably 22, 25 feet from the edge of the building before you get to the first rise of the stair. And that view in particular, I think because of the angle of it, it made it look quite slot-like, but you're right, it's narrower. And because of the grade change, it feels a little bit canyon-like.
Well, it's that canyonization that I think is something that should be avoided at all costs. And, of course, that stair lobby could be opening out onto Ipswich, or the entire lobby could be set back X number of feet to integrate the main lobby. I mean, not integrate, but to differentiate the main lobby from the elevator lobby. I'm a little worried that public elevator lobby, that door is kind of narrow. It's hard to see. I think it has to be, you're putting a lot of effort into the stair, and I think it should be celebrated in a much stronger way. So that's one suggestion. The second suggestion is, and it may seem minor, but how the entry on the Upper Side, how far down from Boylston Street is that? What's that vertical dimension? You're down 4 or 5 feet there?
Yeah, I see. So in section, yeah. It varies depending on where we measure, but I would say from the corner, which would be, sorry to keep flipping through, from this where the crosswalk is to the door, it's about 3 feet. Yes.
So what do you gain by having that lower than Boylston Street? And would it actually be a stronger building that had the front door not stepping, not lower than the street? And I mean, that's a pretty straightforward question. Any thoughts? In other words, I have to believe you, with the BPDA's help, if you needed another 3 feet in the height of the building, that solved this problem. That would be seen in a positive way.
I see. So to raise the front door up a few feet so it feels more at the same elevation grading wise as the intersection.
And
Right.
it's
Yeah, that's a
go ahead.
Go ahead, sorry. So it's a great question, and it gets wrapped up in some of the complexity of coordinating with the Department of Transportation around their plans, which are advancing but still not complete, and making sure that as their two new bridges that they're building over the Turnpike and Ipswich Street come into a landing, they need to slope down gently to meet the existing intersection. That sets the height of all of this. They are grading down to existing grade at the property line. We do have some more coordination to do with them because we have lots of questions for them about how all of this is going to work with what's happening inside our property line. For right now, we're taking them at face value, which is that they want to meet existing grade at the property line, and that kind of sets us to be up just a little bit from that elevation in terms of this first floor height. I will say that as we raise the front door, it also makes the stair taller and therefore longer. Yeah,
of course. Well, I would encourage you to do some three-dimensional studies that both either defend that position you just set forth or actually make revisions, even if it means that you have to assume the worst case, which is that the dimensions that are being given to you are the ones you have to live with. But you could always, you can raise the building, and I don't think the city loses anything by getting this major front door up to a little higher. You mentioned that it's the front doors along that whole Park Drive that have the front doors have been historically the things that bring a kind of liveliness to the building. And I fear that this front door is in your elevations is quite quite minimal.
Right.
You can bring it up if you want. There you go. I mean, that's that front door on your low piece could use some excitement. It seems to me, much like architects in the past brought exciting front doors along Park Drive. And I'm not saying making them historic, but as an attitude. So that's the second thing. The third one is the hard one. It's the bustle, of course. And when we presented to the commission earlier, I was concerned about it then, and I continue to be concerned about it. And I think it would be very interesting for you to share with us what you what other alternatives you had, because I'm not sure the bustle is getting you anything, and I think it's a complexity that is makes the building much more a little more complicated and takes away from the clarity. And I'm not asking you to maintain the exact facade treatment of the tower, but you've got a tower that's pretty well resolved, and the bustle feels like it's an alien force. And I don't know if that's because you want to get a little more square footage in the building, but I don't see the bustle as a positive architectural element. And but maybe you can share with us tonight what that bustle is, what's the meaning of that bustle, and then we can comment.
It's a good question. I think, at its root, the bustle makes the project financially viable. So there are quite a number of units in that area of the building, and we've definitely looked at many different massings where it becomes a little more integrated with the tower. The footprint of this site is very limited, and trying to keep all of the elements that are abutting the park as low as possible and respect the existing cornice lines and roof lines, and trying to keep that portion of the building under 70 feet. There's only so many areas where we can find the square footage that's needed for the project. And so we created the bustle. The building could be taller and it would all live in the footprint of the light colored tower, but there are other considerations relative to height on this site and sensitivities to height. So that's not probably in the cards for us. And we looked at versions where it was facade wise more integrated with the tower and even kind of more rectilinear. And I think the feedback that we got in our own kind of self-criticism of it is that it just felt tacked on. I think maybe I'm hearing from you that it still feels tacked on.
Yeah, I fear that. I fear that.
Yeah.
And I think it would be very interesting. I assume you probably come back to the committee again to look at some alternatives for the bustle. Out of curiosity, how deep is that bustle off the main building? What's that dimension?
So it varies. It's shallower on the west end. I want to say it's 20 feet. And at the east end, it tapers away from the building, or it expands away from the building, and it becomes about 28, 29, 30 feet at that end.
So it's not even a pure rectangle then?
Correct. Yeah.
So that's another added complexity of the bus, right? I mean, it
That's
appears
right.
in all these renderings to be simply a rectangle attached to the building, and to have it a different shape even adds a level of complexity that is it really something you want? So
I'll show.
and to me, this piece is, in other words, there's so many parts of this building that are really impressive. Where you've got the tower, the question of the public stairway, whether it's with 5-inch risers or 6-inch risers, but the idea of connecting these two parts of the city seemed really good. But I'm finding these little moves are adding complexity and not giving you much in return. And so I would urge that we look at the bustle with some clear eyes at the next session. Because it doesn't feel part of the building.
Do you think, Bill, that it in terms of its facade articulation, it needs to be more related to the tower and less related to the base?
Well, I think it's by being related to the base and being such a narrow piece, looks like it's a strange addition. So whether it is part of the tower or something else again, of even a different shape, I'm not quarreling with the square footage of the bustle, but it's simply the architectural design. So, I mean, it's not up to me to tell you one thing is better than the other. I can only comment where I see something that is detracting from the power of the building.
Got it.
And I welcome when you'll probably find, since you know our work so well, I mean, Brett used to work with us and he's a very fine architect. We probably have a bustle somewhere in our legend of work that I'm not admitting to, though I don't know what it is. But it seems this is a real opportunity. You're comparing this to other major gateway projects in Boston, and this is one where the minor addition, the 5% of the building is, I think, taking away significant amounts of design power from the rest of the building. So those are my, I mean, I hope you're hearing my applauding couple of the big moves of this project. And I mean, in fact, I applaud the two big moves are the base and the tower, and each of them in their way are very strong with, you know, minor comments, but this bustle, I think, is detracting.
I'm going to sort of jump in on a couple of things that my colleague, Commissioner Ron, just mentioned. I at a minor level, I'm going to talk primarily about the landscape, of course, but I do share the awkwardness with the bustle in its current connection. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Your voice is getting mushed up, but I think we can hear you.
Okay, I'm going to turn my video off then to make it
Okay.
easier. So, but actually, I don't want to focus on the bustle. What I really want to focus on are the landscape moves, and in particularly the stair. First of all, I should say I didn't see this at full commission, but Brett and Emmett, thank you for a very good presentation, very clear, organized, and it is a lovely project. So I too share the discomfort with the stair. Can we go to the one that doesn't have the art in it? Because I see the art as I think the art's a very strong idea, but I think if we're looking at the art, we really need to look at it at a very specific level. And so I wanted to start off with this one, and we can move to the other ones. I think I appreciate some of the decisions that you've made about wanting to make it feel public, using the language of, the public language of concrete, of particular plain gray concrete everywhere, although I'm not sure I agree with it. And it's also the same with the heaviness of the stone base as you wrap around the corner. I think somehow sneaking in things that are more special, that are exceptional. And I know your office, Emmett Works, does extremely strong work with respect to public art or public artists. I think one of the moves that you've done in the other rendering, the rendering that had the public art, and you don't have to flip to it just at the moment, was the separating of the stair from the wall. I think that starts to lighten it a little bit. So I think any move that is taking things, stepping it a little bit away from the prosaic, even if the prosaic is the most beautiful, emerald necklace with Olmsted. Again, I question the extent of plain concrete. I know that from a public perspective that we will need poured concrete, but potentially there's something like exposed aggregate that can take it another step further. I also completely agree with Bill, if at least the bottom levels could be pushed back a little bit further to widen the stair. And maybe Bill mentioned bringing the stair forward. There may be some other element, it may be the particular public art qualities that do it. It may be light. It may be a material change that's embedded in the wall. I don't know, whatever it is, but I think it does need to be more celebrated. I think the elegance of the emerald necklace and the material needs to be carried through, but I don't think we've totally cracked it, and I do think having more width would certainly help. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, maybe can we go up to the Boylston plan or the Boylston view? Yeah, this is actually what I was talking about the extent of concrete. I think it does make the building, the public space of the building is particularly with the addition of the blue bikes, is shrunk quite a bit. I was wondering, and this may not be a desirable architectural thing, but what it would look like if the entry were to shift a bay or a half bay towards the corner. Because I think the blue bikes get really tucked in. It's kind of awkward to maneuver through there. And I think that there feels a real sort of tightness with respect to your own landscape. And I understand, I saw in another view you had the blue bikes facing the public way, facing the Boylston Street connection. I could see both directions, but you chose to give the more generous, the more the less functional side, the blue bikes being facing your building as opposed to facing the public way, which I think is entirely fine. But I think when you get to the far side of it, it's a tiny little corridor that you have to come out, and I think it makes the public space associated with your building feel very private. And the other thing that I wanted to say, and these are all things to work on, because I do think it's a strong project. You have not very much landscape area to work with, but I think you're doing a nice job with it. But the thing that I don't understand completely is the language orientation and sort of concept of the seat walls scattered throughout. So maybe Emmett, you could talk to some of that, in particular
Sure.
the seat walls.
I think this is a good view, Brett. Sure. Starting on the Boylston level, as you've kind of noted, we do have a pretty limited space to work with. So we've tried to step those seat walls slightly as you move from south to north. And that's to kind of emphasize, we see that move as a big one coming from south on the row homes on the sidewalk there through the public stair. So kind of easing that corner by pulling the seating elements back as you move north. And then on the upper level, or on the Ipswich level, admittedly, that's somewhat of a remnant of the previous design, but the angularity we felt like made it a little bit more dynamic and also bought us some more space. It's a pretty limited swath of area that we're working with there. So we felt like angling it gave it a little bit more dynamism and then allowed more opportunity for us to face some of these benches towards each other to make it a little bit more social while not taking up as much space.
Yeah, and I see that. The overall landscape concept, which I know you are very strong at your office, doesn't seem to be coming through. And I think starting, I would ask to, I would start with the public stair again, since this is the most significant thing. And I do question just the very wide, vast plain concrete top and bottom, and the into the stone stair. And then the corner itself of the plaza at the Boylston Street corner, where the concrete comes and wraps around the corner, it does feel a little bit awkward, like it kind of bleeds off. So I'm wondering if there's a way that you can get more of a feeling of it both being a public landscape, but also it being an elevated landscape at the same point.
I think that's exactly the balance that we're trying to strike, and certainly appreciate those comments. And we'll look for ways to kind of elevate, but still try to pay homage to the Emerald Necklace and make it feel like a part of the whole.
And then to just reiterate, because I think it's helpful to look at this plan. I think I didn't think of it, but Bill's suggestion of bringing the stair forward to a certain degree, I think is a very, very good suggestion. And if there's a way that everything could shove over a little bit to give you a little bit more breathing space, as well as something like what you were doing on your art connection, or a recess, or a light element between the stone stair and the wall, just somehow to take some of the heaviness of that very heavy base, to cut the edge off that heaviness a little bit.
Sure.
Commissioners, I just want to flag the time for you. It's 5:55 and we're still to take public comment. Do we have any other discussion we wanted to get to before asking for public comments?
No.
Commissioner Koterides, I see you're unmuted.
I'm unmuted?
Okay,
No,
excellent.
no.
Okay, no problem.
Please go ahead.
Great. Then
great.
at this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute public testimony to raise your digital hand, and staff will call on you. If you are calling in by phone, press the number 9 on your dial pad to activate the raised hand function and dial 6 to mute and unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes. Sarah Freeman, I see you've got your hand raised. Are you able to unmute yourself?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
So, hi everyone. I'm Sarah Freeman. I live in Jamaica Plain, but I'm involved in a lot of emerald necklace issues. And I worked for many years at Landmark Center, so I feel like I have a foot in this neighborhood too. I wanted to comment on the slide that listed some of the feedback. Height was not included. And they did, the presenter did later on acknowledge that they had lowered the tower 20 feet and the bustle 30 feet, but it bothers me that a lot of the slides, like the Boylston Street facade and the character, they only show a few bottom floors. There were some that showed the height of the building, but I think when you zoom in like that, you don't really capture the height. And they did express that it was taller than the gateway allows, which I'm aware of a lot of neighborhood concern about that. So just want to add that that's still an issue. And I think I'm curious, on those close-ups, how many floors were not shown, or how many feet? Can someone answer that?
If
I
that sounds
can
like I was going to say, go ahead, Brett. You can directly respond to Sarah's question.
Well, the building overall is proposed at 28 stories, and I think different views show different elements. The first floor is at Ipswich, the second level is at Boylston Street, and it kind of rises from there. So depending on the view, some or all of the floors weren't visible in that view. I don't need to go through each one, but I think 28 is the top, and level 1 obviously would be the ground floor.
Thank you. I think the images showed 6 to 8 floors typically.
Thanks, Sarah, for your comment. Marie Fukuda, are you able to unmute yourself?
Hi, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello?
Yes,
Oh,
we can hear you.
hi.
Go ahead, Marie.
I apologize. Hi, my name is Marie Fukuda, and I'm a Fenway resident, and I also sit on the IAG. And I apologize because I was in the wrong meeting, so I didn't get to see the presentation. But the reason that I'm here is I know that the proponents have been working really hard to address some of the community concern. And I know equally that the BCDC has been working on design concerns. But what I haven't known as an IAG member is to what degree the BCDC is responding to concerns around the Park and Parkways ordinance. And then secondly, how it's responding to concerns over the zoning variance being sought with the project. And I think from what I've heard that the project is seeking a design that meets certain aesthetic standards and might be resulting in more exposure of the grand stairway, resulting in a tall, slim building. But the gateway designated height is 135 feet, and I think is seen by many residents as having some sort of precedence for what happens around it. And from my perspective, that gateway designation was given very intentionally because of its proximity to sensitive parkland. So I'm just here to state that because I don't know if the BCDC is having conversations around those pieces as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Marie, for the question. And commissioners, if you don't mind, I'm happy to respond that the determination of whether or not the project is compliant with the parks ordinance will ultimately is not the purview of this commission. That's for the Parks Commission to determine. And same for whether or not the proponent has sort of met the, let's say, threshold for what would be reasonable to grant a zoning variance. That's the Zoning Board of Appeals. So that's another body entirely. Does that help clarify? So this commission doesn't determine whether or not a variance should be granted or whether or not the ordinance is.
Yes, thank you. I think it does help clarify,
Okay.
but it also points out a lot of interrelated things that cross community concern. So I'm just here to voice that height is very much a concern, as is the precedent that this building is setting from its treatment of the ordinance and the height variance that is being sought. So to whatever degree that informs design, I encourage those considerations. Thank you.
Thanks, Marie. We appreciate your comment. Commissioners, I'm scrolling up and down now. Is there anybody else who would like to contribute public comment at this time? I am not seeing any additional hands raised.
We have one.
Oh, Councillor Durkin.
Hi, I just wanted to let you all know that I'm on this meeting, but a lot of my questions about this specific proposal are not germane to like the architectural and the design, but I just wanted to let the residents know that are on this call that I've been on the call, but that I will use the other parts of the public process to weigh in. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor. Also, Frederica, I see your hand raised.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm a longtime resident of the Fenway and also on the Emerald Necklace Conservancy park advisors, and very concerned with park issues and precedents that might be created by this anomaly of a 275-foot building. My opinion is that it sticks out like a sore thumb, and that was voiced by a lot of people at the meeting of the BPDA earlier this month, for basically the same reasons as has been expressed by a couple of the speakers before. It's disrespectful and inappropriate here. And I was also in the wrong meeting. I was in the BU meeting, and I thought it was quite interesting because there was discussion about maybe, I think it was a 15-story building being a nice prominent size with regard to its relationship to the Charles River. Well, we have the Muddy River here, a lot smaller scale, a lot smaller and narrower parkway than the Charles River, but yet we're looking at a 275-foot tower, which does not make sense here. To me, it's like this was done just to see if it'll stick. It doesn't stick. And it would set a bad precedent, because what do you think would happen to the 3 miles of parkways from here on? The whole protection of the parkways was deemed to be necessary when this land was created as a park, the Emerald Necklace Parkways. The Parkway Ordinance was established at the same time, basically, as the Emerald Necklace. So it was intended to protect the parks from overreach and from degradation of the parks. This does not respect that in any way. The tower is totally inappropriate and needs to come down. The precedent is the most dangerous thing. I did have a question that I'd sent in by email, and it was sort of answered. You just answered it, Elizabeth, that no, it's not being considered as far as the zoning non-compliance, that's someone else's job. But really, my question is then, why, or is it normal for the BCDC to opine and create suggestions on projects that are like totally hypothetical zoning wise? So that's my comments and a little bit of a question, but I'm a little uncomfortable with the fact that this is being looked at by the BPDA when it is so far out of compliance of anything that is applied to this. Thank you.
Thanks, Federica, for your comments. I am happy to respond to the last portion of your question there, which is it regular for the commissioners to comment on projects seeking kind of hypothetical zoning because the Boston Zoning Commission makes a determination about the appropriateness of granting a variance after the BCDC reviews a project, frankly, after the Article 80 process is concluded. And I would say that that is very normal. We have a lot of zoning in Boston that is very out of date. And I would say most projects that appear before this commission require zoning relief in some dimension. Commissioners or to the proponent team, was there anybody who had any additional comments before we kind of we don't need to take a vote, you know, obviously this is subcommittee, but we do need to determine what sort of next appropriate steps are for this project team.
Can I just say a very minor point of clarification? I think that when I was suggesting that the stair get wider, it wasn't that the whole building necessarily needs to move over or get taller, but that may just be impacting the lower levels.
Thanks, Shauna. Catherine Green, I see that you've raised your hand. Happy to take one last public comment, but we're trying to move on. Are you trying to comment on 2 Charlesgate, or are you able to unmute?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi. My name is Catherine Greeno, and I live in Audubon Circle. I've been a community activist and served on the Audubon Circle Neighborhood Association for over 40 years. I've also been on the board of the Fenway CDC. I'm very concerned about this building because it is, as Freddie Vikely said, very disrespectful of both the parks and the buildings around it. And I don't understand how on earth it's gotten this far. The idea that any building of 275 feet could be built in that space, to me, is only reflective of how the BPDA kowtows to developers. That is, oh, you want to put a building here? Oh, fine. It doesn't matter how tall it is. We've seen that all along Boylston Street. And I think it's been to the overall detriment of the character of this neighborhood. I have 2 questions. One is on the timeline of this project in terms of when the developer hopes the final approvals will be granted and how that intersects with the plans for the Bowker overpass.
Are a member of the proponent team able to speak to that?
Sure. Hi, Kathy. This is David Hunt with the proponent. We're still in the midst of the public process. I don't think there's any hopes for us and dates that we have to, achieve the approvals. And I believe, Brett, you can help me jump in, but the next step with DOT and the Bowker overpass is advanced design drawings. And when are those expected?
I don't have a specific date, David, but they are only at the 25% design level. My understanding is they've advanced them. The next submission, I believe, is a 75% design level, which would be coming in the coming months.
Okay, so you would have to have the 100% achieved and then approved before you could really go ahead and know what the Bowker overpass would look like and make adjustments to your project. Is that correct?
Yes, and hoping to coordinate with them through the process as well.
Okay. Okay. I also want to make a comment on the idea of a glowing light at the top of the building. In my mind, the building, as Freddie rightly said, sticks out like a sore thumb. The idea of having a glowing light on top of it makes it even stick out like a sore thumb with a bright red top. In general, the BPDA has allowed all sorts of buildings downtown recently to have signage put on top, which I think has turned Boston into Las Vegas with really unattractive signs and lighting that really are destroying the integrity of the city and making it commercially oriented rather than a city that has a lot of history and integrity to be respected. So I would very much oppose any lighting on the top of the building.
Catherine, thanks for your comments. We've hit the 2-minute mark. Okay, commissioners, I see at this time no additional raised comment. We're gonna close the comment period. Is there anybody who would like to make recommendations for next steps? Sorry, Bill, you've got I can see that you're muted and speaking, but we can't hear you.
That happened. Can I suggest that we meet again with the proponents in a month? And I think we've raised the public has raised a set of issues, but we've also, and I think you should expect to have a dialogue with the proponents about those issues. I don't think we're ready to take it to commission.
I agree with Bill. I think we could see this in the next subcommittee.
Okay. Well, if there are other commissioners who have a different opinion, please let me know. Otherwise, we'll plan to see this project at the next design subcommittee meeting. Okay. Thanks to this proponent team. I'm going to invite commissioners who were recused from this project to join this presentation. And Lizzie, if you want to take a second to go ahead and promote everybody else to presenter. Are folks from the presentation team already ready to go?
Yes, can you add BK Bowley, please?
I believe BK Bully does have co-host permissions.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Wonderful.
Okay, this will be the first presentation of the proposed project to the design subcommittee following an introduction at the February 6th monthly meeting. It's my understanding that there are no commissioners present who intend to recuse themselves from this deliberation. Is this correct? Excellent. Then thank you. With that, I invite the proponent team to go ahead and present whenever you're ready. We'll give you a 2-minute heads up when 8 minutes has passed.
Great, thank you. Share my screen. Hello, very happy to be here with all of you. I know this wasn't part of the preview we sent you, but realized at the last minute that there may be people folks on here that didn't see the original presentation. So I just wanted to do a quick flash up of where the site is, which is in Alston, and it's looking at the railroad tracks and I-90 and Cambridge Street on one side, and then it's wrapped by Alston Green along Pratt and Linden Street on the other side. So I'm just gonna stop sharing for a second and then open up our actual presentation here, where we will start away. And thank you. I'm Tamara Roy from Stantec. With me is BK Boley and also Rob Adams from Halverson. So I hope you can see my screen, and I would like to do full screen here. Okay. All right, so very happy to be here. We are presenting this project after hearing lovely feedback last time we saw you in February. So just a brief overview of the project. It's about 16 stories and then 2 7-story wings with a little amenity deck in between. It has over 300 units, and we've pushed the massing toward the back of the site purposely to create this immense 67% of open space. We have underground parking, almost 100 spaces. And what we heard from you all was you wanted to see more of a focus on the entry experience as a whole. What is the carrot, which is here, the sort of driveway from Pratt Street and the entrance here to the building. Also the character of the fire truck, emergency access lane, which goes to the back of a future people's path, which hopefully will connect, various other growth opportunities over on the right and the left. There was a discussion about super block entryways because Alston Green is proposed to our south and west. And so when they actually are built, the 4 buildings together may be perceived as a super block. Then asked some questions about how our angles and massing was configured, and then wind analysis, and also a little bit about our materials for the building. So now I'm going to hand it over to Rob Adams to talk about the public realm.
Yeah, thanks, Tamara. I think, we got a lot of good feedback from BCDC at the original presentation, and there's been quite a bit of, I'll say, correspondence and good feedback with the BPA directly. What you see in front of you is a plan of what we presented last time, and just kind of going around the horn here, so to speak. There was a request for planted buffers along the northern edge. So the image that Tamara showed at the beginning, the railroad and Mass Pike is to the north. To the south is Pratt Street, which is where our entry experience is, and then Linden Street is to the left. And as Tamara showed, those 3 buildings that you see in the left bottom and bottom left are the proposed Alston Green, which BCDC BPA has reviewed and approved. So what you see is kind of where we were last time. There was questions about the planted buffer, questions about the character of this fire egress lane that we have essentially penetrating the entire site, questions and discussion about the entry experience. And I think on this slide, at least talking about this notion of the super block, I think maybe we didn't do a very good job holistically of talking about our different kind of penetrations or portals into the site. But we have, working with Alston Green and Concept, made out accommodations for essentially on the left side, the Linden Street Paseo that bisects their project. And then on the bottom, there's a penetration and opening and a pedestrian connection from Pratt Street between 2 of their buildings. And then on the right is our entry experience as well, coming onto Pratt Street. And then on the very top, as Tamara mentioned, is this proposed People's Pike and making a connection to that. This project is not building the People's Pike, but you'll see in later slides that will accommodate that in future. So next slide, Tamara. And I think where we've gotten now is a vast improvement over where we were today. All those connections still remain. None of that has changed. And just giving you a quick lowdown of the building, you can see the 1 or the orange is ground floor tenant units. Blue is bike parking. 2, the kind of yellow area is tenant amenity space. And 3 is the entry lobby. 5, the gray is back of house. And so you can see very much facing Pratt Street and facing the open space is both lobby, amenity space, activation. And just kind of walking around responses to some of the things we've heard, we were able to, on the top, move our access way, provide shade trees along that northern edge, move and crop some of our building a little bit to provide a planted buffer as requested along that western edge. And then we've really, I think, done a good job of accommodating and or integrating those connections from Linden Street, Pratt Street, that are part of the Alston Green. And we'll work with our structural folks, you'll see in a little bit, but one of the requests was, can we maybe put foundations or infrastructure in so that these stairs, ramps, et cetera, are more accommodating in future, so that it's not such an obstacle to put them in later when Alston Green happens in the future. One of the two big.
Oh, go ahead. I was just going to add the architectural piece, which is that we had our transformers and switchgear out here in the front entry, and we were able to put it inside the building and hide it behind some doors, which you'll see in our sections and elevations.
Right. So starting on the right, I think one of the big focuses was this entry experience. And as Tamara said, we moved the transformers, increased the amount of green, actually shifted the drive to create a better pedestrian connection on the left side. So a small seating area, wider path, more direct access to the open space. We also, I think, another big move is we relocated the dog park to the left. Before, it used to be right next to the drop-off area, and moved the dog park to the left, created a more welcoming entry plaza. And then probably the best move that we've made collectively is we've pushed the fire truck access path closer to the building, reducing some of the tenant amenity area, but then increasing the public realm associated with the open space. Next tomorrow. And so you'll see a series of sections after this, but I think really hammering home, all these connections are ADA accessible. Pratt Street is less than 5%. Both of those connections through Alston Green are less than 5%. The one that is greater than 5% is the one out to Linden Street, but we have plenty of room for ramp and stairs, as you'll see in some of the drawings. Next tomorrow. So this is a quick section, and I think it does a really good job of giving you it standing, as you can see in the context plan, standing there looking into the open space, kind of that open, welcoming entry plaza. The fire access lane becomes varied in its materiality and its width, kind of breaking down this notion of a drive. And then the kind of big open, I use this term a lot, but the lungs of the open space, right? A big open civic lawn there in the center. Next tomorrow, please. The other thing that was asked of us is, what does this look like with and without Alston Green? And so you can see on the section roughly from the same area, taking a little bit closer to the west. And you can see on the top is without Alston Green with the existing houses, essentially a planted buffer. Grade is very similar. And then with Alston Green, a very similar condition, planted buffer, helping buffer that kind of residential unit to the left. Next tomorrow, please. This is through Alston Green's Paseo, and you can see on the left or on the top, without Alston Green, again, a planted buffer, a small retaining wall to help mitigate that, sacrificial retaining wall to help mitigate that grade change. And then with Alston Green, that set of stairs and a ramp in the foreground. And again, this idea of maybe we put in some foundations in phase 1 so that those stairs can be more easily constructed in phase 2 when Alston Green occurs. And then lastly, I think it was important to make larger connections. So this is the People's Path on the left, future People's Path on the left. Our connection won't happen immediately, but very simply, we can make a less than 5% connection from our open space through that fire egress or fire access path to the Futures People Pike. And then on the bottom, you can see that quick section of the amenity terrace, the grade change down to the Future People's Pike and the rail yard beyond. Next, please. And then this is just a quick view into that entry sequence. And you can see it feels very civic and public. Blue bikes in that location, a small seating area, gathering area on the left, working a little bit to maybe give some hierarchy to the sidewalks to make the one on the left a little bit wider. But you can see the building in the background, the lobby, the kind of entrance experience to that main lobby entrance of the building. Next
and
tomorrow.
Concealing the transformers and the switchgear here.
Yep. And then just a quick study. I know BCDC, the group had asked for a quote unquote European entry court. So we've looked at kind of increasing the amount of planted area on the side. This is very generic in its appearance, but looking at some sort of pavement markings, stamped asphalt, et cetera, to give it a better texture and feel. This is with a central planted island. And on the next slide, I think we've shown it without the central planted island. In some ways, the central planted island provides some clarity to circulation that, you know, the big open court I say in American kind of turning radiuses doesn't provide. And so we're happy to have this conversation, but we are exploring those two possibilities. I think next tomorrow is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Just to let the proponent team know, you have 2 minutes left for your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we only have 3 other slides and an animation. The animation is a little less than 2 minutes, so we're not going to do it right now. But if you would let us, we could do it during the Q&A at some point. So we were also asked just about the geometry of the building, and you can see the sort of the relationships of the blue lines to the edge of the site and how that related to this wall and also these sight lines. It's basically an offset of just about all of the parcels around us. And then where we have our tower, they're 90-degree relationships, trying to get at least some amount of efficiency of construction in this area of the pink zone. And then on the right, what you can see is we had some wind conditions that were, slightly less than optimal, especially here. And so we really feel this is like a super win-win because the wind comes around here and then was creating a bad spot right there. So we created a fin that goes along these balconies, which we think we could do something really interesting and decorative. And we added a porch that would pick up the wind and sort of bounce it along so that it wouldn't affect the ground level. So that is what partly led us then to pushing the fire access close to the building and creating this great amenity space here, but opening up our landscape area. And then lastly, we were asked just about more of the materiality of the building. So I'm going to just go from left to right, thinking about this tower as sort of a golden color blend brick on top of precast with black window frames. And then we have, our concept is actually sort of industrial reference to the past warehouses on the site. So we were trying to bring in some lattice screening from brick construction. And then our entry, which again is sort of a nod to some industrial character, as well as the brown building where we will have some textures and balconies, as well as these sort of open areas that group the windows together up above. So I think that really covers it. Our animation does go from Pratt Street through this area where we pushed the entry drive over around to this new zone here where the dog park used to be, around the dog park, up to the top of here and back down again to show you the porch. So that's what we have. Happy to take your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioners, the floor is yours. And I just wanted to note that I believe we were joined by Commissioner Kim.
And I'm just going to return to the site plan, which I think has probably the most information for everyone.
Mara, could you just, you may have mentioned this, I may have missed it in the beginning, talk a little bit about the edge condition as the development kind of faces these single family homes and things like that, like how that's being managed in the interim condition?
I think that's probably the one place we've covered it is in these sections with and without Alston Green.
Yeah.
And I'm going to turn it over to Rob. Really?
Yeah, I mean, we have a little bit of grade change, I think, which helps so we can berm up that planted buffer. And then it's just really a mixture of, I'll say, understory ornamental trees and understory shrubs.
So are you putting a fence around the whole property?
I think most of the property owners have a fence along their property line. And so we'll probably either utilize theirs or obviously work it out in CDs, but double up and provide our own fence. When Alston Green occurs, they have retaining wall, guardrail, etc., associated with their project. But yeah, there will be a fence, most likely either their existing owners or ours as part of the project.
Because you face like different things, like a parking lot, single family homes. There's lots of different eclectic. It's like an eclectic contextual condition. And
it is.
So
well, there's really a big warehouse building, Kyung, on the side of us.
On the west side.
It's only Pratt Street that has the individual houses.
Right. Well, I guess I'll start. I remember the project from a while ago and seeing how it's transformed. And I think there's a lot of really great things that you've done here with the landscape. I mean, I do like that it no longer looks like you have a fire lane going through this area. I think that that's really effective. I wonder if you could go back to the site plan. And I also like that you've moved the dog park. I don't think I was in a meeting to request it. Maybe you guys did that on your own, away from that corner. Do you still have, if I recall correctly, there was like an artificial turf area outside of the building area and labeled 4?
Yeah, we have an area, unfortunately, where the fire truck, a hammerhead, more or less, where the fire trucks need to turn
Oh, it
around.
has to come in there. I see. Okay.
And there
But we're
is
thinking of using it as a yoga
Yeah.
area and be able
Off
to
the
have
amenity
movable
space.
furniture and things off of the amenity space here.
I mean, I think also the reduction of the amount of paving so that it doesn't feel like a drive court really helps. You used to have, if I remember correctly, like a seating area, like little seating nooks or something at the front entrance, like right when you come in.
Yeah,
And
yeah, go ahead, sorry.
yeah, and I feel like there's a lot of great programmatic elements in the project, and I just wonder if there's something about that, like the quiet thing. I remember that in maybe it was something that was sent to us, there was something about health and wellness and contemplation, and I feel like the plus of making this feel more cohesive as a single space, maybe there's a loss of that one element of diversity in the experience. And if you could find a place for that where residents could come out and read a book or do something like that would be nice. Because I did feel like maybe on the right side of the entrance where you now have the blue bikes, there were these like little seating nooks, which wasn't the best place for seating nooks. But I know, that's something that's very popular when you have people living there, and especially if you have some playground area, it'd be nice if there was an edge where mom and dad could sit along the edge and watch their kids play, but like look at their phone or read a book. So that's the one piece that maybe you could try to find a location for it. Last thing is it does feel like there's these really sharp edges, like in your effort to really break down the read of the road. And I just would love to have some confirmation that those will work. Like where the yellow sort of creates a very sharp corner, and then the green does that as well. So, you guys will look at that.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments. I think spot on about it'd be nice to have a little bit of small respite, 1 or 2 people.
I know, because I was ready to suggest that you could put it over where the artificial turf area is. So that's a bummer that I can't go over there, but it's not a small site. So I think they're just, that neighborhood, there's a dearth of green space. So I think the more green you can make this, the more popular it will be.
Agreed. We can definitely incorporate that.
So I just want to follow up on Nick Young. I appreciate, Rob and Tamara, a lot of the planning moves with respect to the open space. I actually did suggest the move of the dog park, Nick Young, because I thought it was, even though it's popular, it was kind of creating a blockage. So I think the thickening of the open space on the left of the driveway and the ease of entering the whole space, I think is really helpful. I think the diminishing of the width of the fire lane, or at least the visual impression of it, I'm still sort of bothered by that big patch of gray asphalt close to, I don't know which connection it is, but that connection. I don't mind it at the end because it sort of feels okay, now we're kind of getting down to business, but that kind of feels like it's still in the middle. middle of the space. I think that the views are pretty convincing with the amount of open space. So the only thing that I am not, well, the one thing that I'm not totally sold on yet, but I have confidence you can develop it, is the language of the landscape, the specific elements scattered throughout the paving patterns, their directions, some of the specific shapes. And I think one of the ones that is that also the kind of big angle where it hits the asphalt, but I certainly think that that's something that you can develop as you push further with the project. I personally liked the planted version of the court. On the realm of making it a more European court, I'm wondering, and again, I know this is a cost issue, if it could be pavers instead of stamped asphalt. And I would also, I don't know that you do have the space, but it would be very nice if you did have the space to get out to the walkway along the tracks on the right-hand side as well as on the left-hand side of your project.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
piggybacking on that, I think it would be nice if there could be a simplification in the paving design. It does feel like there's lots of different things going on. And yeah.
Yeah, Shauna, we did talk about that. We really want to make sure that, when people are moving along at good speed with their bikes, that there aren't a lot of different people showing up on the path in all kinds of places. But also, this is really our parking entrance and service area. And so to invite people to try to go there, and this is ramping down quite a bit to get down to the basement. So it's just really difficult in a tight spot. So I think when we were talking to Councillor Breeden, she was very, very interested in just this, entrance here, and then pull people through and bring them to the rest of Alston in that kind of movement.
Mhm.
And it gives our fire access lane a real purpose.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and the rest of your comment, Sean, I don't I wish we could make it perfect in the 2-week time frame, right, every time, and not always possible. But I and McYoung, I agree that the pavement pattern needs to simplify. That kind of image in the upper left with the pavers in different colors and then they terminate. There's something I think nice about that because it doesn't feel too heavy-handed and it's not a change in materiality. And so I think that may be the direction we pursue. And Sean, I think there is an option in which maybe the whole entry court isn't unit pavers, but there's a a strip or an edge condition that kind of starts to accentuate those the material change. So we'll definitely continue to look into those.
Yeah, and last thing, if you could take a look at the edge condition, I think in some areas it may make sense to have like a really consistent architectural fence that really starts to clean up. I don't really know what's happening behind all of those individual homes, but I imagine they're not all the same. And so this is one project where I'm thinking maybe it would be better to have something that really kind of creates a clean divider that's consistent and really says this is a different precinct.
Right. The backdrop for the plant material and the program of the open space.
But I do think that there's been a lot of progress made from before where it really felt like basically a drive-through. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Would anybody be interested in seeing our less than 2-minute animation, or shall we open it up to more commissioners first?
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be
That was a
great.
sure,
Yeah,
Phil?
we'd love to see it.
Okay. All right, wonderful. I'm going to hide my.
And I'll qualify, we all understand that plant material in 3 dimensions is not Laura, look.
Don't worry, Rob, we won't hold you to account.
If there's a yucca that shows up, that's not intention.
Okay, so we are starting on Pratt Street. We did model a little bit of Alston Green here on the left, and this is our entrance. And I'm just gonna go through this a little bit. I'm happy to stop at any time. So we're turning into the driveway, right? And that's the little area where you could always wait for someone to pick you up. You could see the transformer switchgear glass there, the round, very lushly planted circle. Where the dog park was now is this very welcoming, public facing open space. Our green lawn. Again, very active today, McYoung, as opposed to contemplative. But I'm sure some days it'll be quiet. There's the dog park there to the left, planted behind a seating bench there. And then we're going to move up the ramp to see the gap between Alston Green, where it's raised up a bit. So you get a real view, kind of promontory as we turn around. You're going to look toward the People's Path there and the greenery that we added on the left. And then some of the outdoor terraces to the units on the ground level. This area of, wind conifers, then our turnaround, also our porch, our new porch you can see on the left, again, coming back down the fire lane. And then we're gonna just slowly stop again at that porch, right, which opens to our amenity space. So again, just kind of thrilled that this piece wasn't here before and now is. It seems like it's a real scale changer for pedestrians in the park compared to the tower, and also does the work of the wind mitigation. That's it.
Tamara or Rob, how far off are we from making that ramp a slope?
Quite a ways. It's a 5-foot grade change. It's going to be hard to, we'd have to almost double the length, 1.6 the length.
Okay.
It would extend. I don't know that a switchback is the right answer.
Okay.
Okay, usually when you show more, you get more comments back.
I'm sorry, I can't seem to show my face again, but I'm here. Open to any
Commissioners,
other-
if we don't have any immediate comments, I'm happy to do the public comment script thing.
I'm sure that our architectural colleagues will have some comments. I hate to speak on Kathy and Bill's behalf, but I imagine just give us 2 minutes.
I think we can go with public comments, Christina. Excuse me.
Great.
I'm losing my voice.
At this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute public testimony to raise your digital hand and staff will call on you. If you're calling in by phone, press the number 9 on your dial pad to activate the raise hand function and dial 6 to mute and unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes.
So Lizzie, or Christina, I'm looking at everyone else in the room is part of our team.
Excellent. I was just about to say, commissioners, I see no raised hands at this time.
We're fully in support.
Appreciate that, Tamara. Commissioners, I see no raised hands at this time, so we can conclude the public comment period there. Is there anybody else from the commissioner's perspective who wish to contribute comments, as Commissioner Kim mentioned? All right. Well, we don't need to make a formal vote, but we do need to give the proponent team some next steps, either recommend them for final review and consideration of a recommendation at full commission or a recommendation for additional review at design subcommittee. So what are folks?
I do think there should be, I wasn't in the previous meeting for the architectural comments, Sean, I don't know if you were, but it would be important before we proceed to at least have some feedback from our architectural counterparts or to push this to the next subcommittee meeting. And if, I don't know if who oversaw the last round.
This is the first presentation to design subcommittee. So there was a
see.
presentation to the full commission in, I believe,
Okay, got it.
February.
Got it.
And I think some of the comments that we received were about understanding the massing, how we ended up with the layout that we did, the orientation of the tower relating to Linden Street. We weren't able to explain that at the last meeting. And then there were also some comments about the ground floor, the materiality of the ground floor, and whether we were trying to make 3 different gestures at the connector piece, at the piece on the right, and then the tower on the left. And those have developed into somewhat separate languages, but they're all within the same tones, a kind of tone on tone. And that's why we're using the warmer tones for the buildings in general to relate to what's going on at Alston Green, what is going on around Pratt Street. We did get comments from the BPDA staff about the ground floor wings closest to Alston Green, where we have units, but it's still a double height space. It's a taller space. So you saw in that animation that was different than some of the renderings, how we tried to make spandrel glass or clear story glass above the doors so that there would be less brick there. And then we've added balconies and try to just refine the language of the 3 different buildings. And there was a question also about materiality. What were the materials of the buildings? Because we didn't have time to go through them at the last meeting.
But Shauna, you were at that first intro. I think that the majority of the comments, McYoung, were about the public open space and the entry drive and less about the building.
I agree. I can't speak for the architectural comments from the meeting, as I don't recall them.
I wonder if it would make sense to, this has happened in terms of landscape, Christina, where either we're not there or in the discussion, but that this deck is sent out on recommendation of this commission to a few of the architectural folks who were part of the original discussion to see if there are additional comments. And I always write back comments through email and then to get recommendations. I think in terms of the landscape, I wouldn't mind seeing the project once more, particularly if some of my fellow commissioners feel that the architecture could use one last review. Just because I think there were some comprehensive questions about the landscape, even though it's really been, it's significantly improved from the last time I've seen it. But
well, to that end, McYoung, should we be making comments? I mean, to me, there are 2 kind of major architectural issues here that we haven't discussed, but I'm not sure, given the nature of the project, it's a difficult project and it's pretty impressive how certainly the landscape has made it become pretty powerful. But half the building's units, of course, look over the railroad tracks. And there's been reference to this People's Pike. Is that the word, Tamara? And, you know, I don't know what that are people going to be wanting to walk along the railroad tracks? And of course, half the residents, how many residents are here? 600 or so?
Well, it's 322 units, so probably around 500.
Yeah, to multiply by at least 2. So, you know, how has this project dealt with that problem? And And what does the project look like from the north, from the Harvard land, as it were? So that strikes me as one architectural question. And the second is there a way to, there's a kind of integration of the three pieces of the building that all feel quite similar. Is that something we feel is the best architectural resolution? Not sure it may very well be, because quite frankly, if it was three very different aesthetics, we would be saying, what's going on here? So do you want to show us very quickly to answer this question, not to answer it, but to suggest that we may want to come back to it in the next meeting? Can you show us along the elevational view you've been showing us from the south, I say the south, and do you have a view from the north?
Yes, do. We also was ready to go here. So let me share my screen here. This was from the earlier presentation. You can see the relative similar height to Alston Green at this edge, and the attempt to connect these two pieces in one architectural language, and then have a slightly different architectural language here, where it's mostly one-story openings on the brown brick building, and then the little gap there of the amenity space and the amenity deck, where we did cut the section through that. You could see the grade change. This is an older drawing, so that's why it's not actually showing all the improvements that were discussed along that People's Pike or People's Path.
But is that in terms of the form of these and the heights and even
Correct.
the coloration, this is a pretty accurate update of where you are still?
Yes. Yes, so 16, 7, and 7 stories, and then a 1-story piece in the middle.
As long as we're on this, do you have a view from the ground level on the other side? On the north, from the ground looking across the railroad track?
I believe we do, but we can certainly, for the next time we see you, we can certainly make that view.
I mean, to me, this is quite handsome imagery. I think the three pieces are enough alike and yet enough different that it seems quite reasonable. And I think the north face of the tower is actually very handsome.
Thank you.
Now, do you have the view from the south?
So this
From
is,
Pratt Street, yeah.
this is the earlier scheme. Now we're in that presentation from February. But yes, it's again similar. So using a similar language, really trying to have a vertical expression on the tower, but then a horizontal wing here, and then the other horizontal wing on the other side.
But in the current presentation, didn't you have another view from a lower angle, perhaps?
Yes, we do. We do.
Also, while she's pulling that up, one of the breakthroughs I think we had was in the study that you had asked, BCDC had asked Alston Green to do, you had asked them to try to figure out how this site might develop. And most of the schemes that were presented were long bars running along the railroad tracks. And then with the help of, I believe it was Mike Canizzo and Matt Martin, they came up with a diagram where there was a kink in the bar. And then we took that kink and we made it the vertical part of the tower, which was farthest away from all the points. But that splitting of those longer elements, and you remember the lot coverage was more like 50% or on those other ones, the lot coverage, not the open space, maybe even less than that. So this kind of diagram allowed us to have more windows not facing the railroad tracks, but facing Cambridge and facing the downtown views, and then the hills to the left with the taller portion of the building. So we thought that that was a pretty nice diagram to develop. Sorry, Tim, you can go to the view that Bill was asking for.
Yes, so not sure which one we had shown, this one, which is just kind of going across all of the three pieces at the pedestrian level lobby, but also then this one, which we showed with and without the green space in the middle.
Maybe take the tree away in that view, just so we could see the entrance and point out where things are.
Sure.
Are there any others? I mean, obviously it's a hard view to get because you've got the Pratt Street buildings, but
right. Just this, that's why we made the video, Bill, just because we felt like it was one of those kind of unfolding experiences rather than seeing a still life when you actually like stood there and looked in. How often would people do that, really? So it's really much more of a kind of moving thing.
Can you
seeing this?
Go back to two images.
This one or the
take
one
away
without the tree?
There we go. Yeah.
But I mean, we think that, you know, that this geometry, which was sort of a whole bunch of offsets, also has this, you know, kind of bending and a relationship around framing the open space between us and Alston Green. That was intriguing to us too. Just kind of letting the negative space shape it.
I would agree with that point. I don't know. To the fellow commissioners, do we want to accept this as kind of where we are? To me, the project is quite strong as presented today, and in these images. And I didn't know whether some of you want to address certain issues or not.
I think that the issues that were brought up about the landscape could be addressed when they come back to full commission, and simplification of paving. Consider some of those views, you could see how the fence that frames the whole project is really important. So kind of a clear idea of the edge conditions. And what else was there, Shauna?
You know, I think it isn't. I think the landscape language, just a clarification and simplification, but also clarification of what the overall landscape language is. And then my particular concern was the area with that sort of half arc of asphalt and the, you know, and I think I would like to see if there was a way to make the sloping walkway work. If there's a way to kind of terrace in a little bit instead of the ramp. But again, I think that could be also looked at at the full commission.
So I'm comfortable. Christine, I'm going to leave it in your court. It's an awfully quiet group of people today, so I think I feel like the team has done like a lot of great work, and it's a refinement for the landscape at least. So, so we'll leave it in your court. I don't think I can speak for the architecture to say, but I guess Bill has kind of confirmed that he feels comfortable with the project moving forward to full committee. Bill, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, you captured what I feel.
Okay. So
I mean, my view of these things is usually we don't get enough time to dig in deep enough to offer useful architectural suggestions. I think, for instance, I'm sorry you weren't in the meeting because you were recused before this project, but I think the conversation was very helpful to generate some direction for them to come back with. And in this case, it feels like we've got a project that has been carefully done, carefully figured out, smart, and we shouldn't put our brethren through too many hoops if we're reasonably happy with what is being shown. And let's face it, this is not an easy project. And I think the building massing, quite frankly, is quite strong. And but others may disagree with me.
No, I don't disagree with you, Bill. I'm just having a hard time talking tonight. Could I just say I endorse McYoung's direction and what you're saying, Bill. I guess, did your presentation include the views from the north?
It did earlier. The original introductory presentation to the commission did. So that's why I just went back to that older presentation for you, because we were trying to follow the directions of 10 slides in 10 minutes or less.
I mean, it's not the defining perspective, obviously, on this project, but it feels like it helped to round out the picture so that what Bill is saying about the entire site makes a whole lot more sense in total. I imagine you would do that, but I think it's important to see the entire circulation around the building.
But would you show that to the full commission, or would you have another committee?
Oh, no, I endorse going to commission with the understanding that the feedback received this evening is incorporated.
So I think that's what we're saying.
Yes.
Christina, is that this can go back to full commission contingent on some refinements to the landscape that we would like to see at that full commission meeting.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate the summary, Commissioner Kim, and at the risk of ending this exactly on time, I think that is very clear feedback to the proponent team. We will see you at full commission when we are able to get you scheduled. So with that, if there are no additional comments or questions, we just want to thank the proponent teams for their time, any members of the public who have joined us this evening, and of course, as always, the commissioners for yet another productive Tuesday evening. So
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good
Excellent.
night, everybody.
Happy to adjourn. Thank you, everyone.